Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. We talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and I'm here to talk about Mississippi. So let's jump right into it. November 4th, 2025, 5 members of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, including 2 Grand Lodge officers and 1 past Grand Master, filed a restraining order against the Grand Lodge of Mississippi. This is a restraining order for anybody that wants to look it up themselves. Civil action number 25-957-T. This is in Lauderdale County, Mississippi. The essence of this, the restraining order, is to halt the process of Masonic charges that are filed against these men. So now that we have the restraining order highlighted, let's go to maybe what started. So I'm looking at a timeline of events here, a lot of pages, so I'm going to summarize it for you the best I can. In 1966, it doesn't go all the way back, but this is some context. In 1966, the Mississippi Demolay Foundation was created. Fast forward to 1985, the Mississippi Demolay Foundation was retitled as the Mississippi Masonic Youth Foundation and fell under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, F&AM. There wasn't the last recorded minutes of this group was in 2000, and the last report that was made at the Grand Lodge session was in 2001. So let's fast forward. I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit to keep you with me. If you've ever been to a Grand Lodge session, we all know the reports, the committees, they'll come up and either read the report in detail depending on your jurisdiction, or they'll highlight a few things. So March of 2025 at the Grand Lodge session in Mississippi, Brother Terry McCloud came to the Grand East to give a report on the 10-year planning committee for the Grand Lodge of Mississippi. During the estimated 45-minute report, I just can't imagine 45 minutes, he kind of went off the rails a little bit, according to many that were in attendance, at least from their perspective. He made some claims, requested some names not to be printed in the annual proceedings, so not to slander members. Just a whole lot of stuff going back and forth. At one point, Terry McCloud and another brother, they got into a verbal altercation in front of everyone at Grand Lodge. From our reports, Terry McCloud asked the Grand Master at the time, who was Jerry Lee Lewis, not that Lewis, and said, hey, can I continue on? And he was granted that. So, like a lot of Grand Lodge sessions, there's probably 30 guys that know what's going on. A lot of folks come to Grand Lodge, and there's a lot of, hey, wonder what's going on here. So much that folks would come up and say, hey, we need some clarification, and little clarification was offered. So at one point, a past Grand Master, Butch Britt, motions that the report of that 10-year planning committee be stricken from the annual proceedings, and the motion was passed by the Grand Lodge. Okay? We could talk about the Grand Master wanting to do some other things with moving the Grand Lodge venue, but I don't think that's nearly as important for this particular case. So let's talk about May of 25. So that happened in March. In May of 2025, Polar Lodge number 154 files Masonic charges. They filed, they, quote, being highly offended at the comments issued by the Ceremonial East, Terry McCloud, via the 10-year planning committee. Not only did they draft charges of unmasonic conduct against Terry McCloud, and also all of the members of the 10-year planning committee. further draft charges against now immediate past Grandmaster Jerry Lee Lewis and immediate past Deputy Grandmaster Michael McMahon for being complicit in allowing this report to be presented in such an offensive manner to any brother or his family. So they filed charges in May. In June, the now Grandmaster, Billy Wayne Bunch, he decides to recuse himself from this Grand Lodge trial. Recuses himself and grants authority to the duly appointed Deputy Grandmaster Brother Melton Broom. I don't know about your jurisdiction, at least in jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, the Deputy Grandmaster is actually elected, and that next year he would be Grandmaster, but that is not the case in Mississippi. So that happens in June. So as we'll continue from that, so now that the Grandmaster recuses himself, sends it over to the Deputy Grandmaster. Deputy Grandmaster issues a notice to the subordinate lodge that a, quote, Grand Lodge trial will be held at Pascagoula, it's across the screen, it's very Mississippi, Lodge number 202 at 0800 on September 27th. There'll be a Grand Lodge trial. Here's a key point. Although the Williams Digest of Laws, which is the Masonic law of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, does not make clear statements of having a Grand Lodge trial, no specific directions or accommodations are laid out in that law. Deputy Grandmaster ordered that each lodge would be limited to one representative to serve as a voting member of the Grand Lodge trial proceedings. That could be a lot of members of the jury. So that was in June. So now we're in September. The past Grandmasters, they decided to tag in. All this nonsense from their point of view. They said, you know what? We don't like any of this. So on September 13th, the 14 past Grandmasters, I can't imagine one being salty with me, but 14 past Grandmasters being opposed to the actions of the most worshipful Grandmaster submitted a resolution for the Grand Lodge office to dispatch. So in summary, here's some things that they didn't like. They said the Grandmaster has no authority to make contractual obligations regarding the change of venue for their Grand Lodge session from 2026 to 2030. I don't know. That Polar Star Lodge number 154 was allowed to file charges against all members of the 10-year Strategic Planning Committee. They didn't like that. They also didn't like that Grandmaster Billy Bunch recused himself from the proceedings. Also, they didn't like that the Deputy Grandmaster issued a notification about a Grand Lodge trial limiting representatives in opposition to the Constitution of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, FNAM, and in further opposition of the Mississippi Non-Profit Corporation Act. Also, they said the most worshipful Grandmaster Billy Wayne Bunch was then a member of the 2024 10-year Strategic Planning Committee and therefore also under charges submitted. So that's kind of interesting. So there's a lot of things there. Now it's September 13th. Well, swiftly after that, the Grandmaster, Billy Wayne Bunch, he pops out a resolution and says, hey, the Grandmaster, this resolution, it's not sanctioned. I don't like that it went through the Grand Lodge. And in fact, our Grand Secretary, Gary Jones, he's been ordered to return the cost of the post mailing for this resolution. This wasn't approved. Okay? In September of 2025, we're still there, right? So a lot of stuff is going on in September. You got the past Grands firing up, the Grandmaster firing back. So in addition, the Grand Lodge body was informed via Grandview, you guys are familiar with Grandview, and through the Grand Lodge social media pages that, quote, upon request of the prosecutor, Brother Chip Bourne, past Grandmaster, that they're granting a continuance for the trial that was scheduled on September 2025. The Law and Jurisprudence Committee of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, FNAM, was formally requested to render a ruling on certain issues material to the proceedings. Their findings would be issued in the near future. The continuance was granted to provide all parties sufficient opportunity to review the committee's report and narrow the issues accordingly. So on October 3rd, there's a report so some folks got together, and so there was a report. Since they didn't have anything set on how they would run this Grand Lodge trial, they said, hey, we need to put together some stuff. So since the formation of the Grand Lodge of Mississippi in 1818, there has been no need for the adoptions of new laws regarding a Grand Lodge trial. However, this committee put together a whole lot of things, list from A through I. Feel free to email us and just put Grand Lodge of Mississippi documents, and would be happy to send you some of these documents. They submitted a whole bunch of things. Basically, this is how it's going to be handled, right? After charges have been filed. That's a key point. So on October 6th, after the committee gets together, the Grand Master, boom, makes that an edict. Edict number 2005-1, that this will be the immediate enforcement for such procedures. Fascinating. On October 10th, 4 days later, past Grand Masters are back. They issue a response and say, yeah, you can't really do this. You can't do it after the fact. Polar Star Lodge number 158, they're out of pocket. Some of the stuff that you're doing now is actually an issue with ex post facto law, and it's a little subversive to the true principles of Freemasonry, so they say. They also say that a great injustice was suffered by the 10-year planning committee if the illegal Grand Lodge trial would be allowed to convene. Okay? So, the 10th, same day, trial commission notice goes out and says, hey, we're moving forward. We're going to have a trial November 5th at Joppa Shrine in Biloxi. This was signed by the Deputy Grand Master, Melton Broom. 4 days later, the Grand Master responds to the past Grand Master's resolution that they wrote on the 14th, basically dismissing them as well. Let's fast forward. So the folks that were charged, and on the document that I mentioned earlier, that they put the restraining order against the Grand Lodge of Mississippi, they were feeling some sort of a way. One of them was a Grand Senior Warden. One's a Grand Secretary, obviously a past Grand Master. So they got with their legal counsel, S. Everett Pepper. Hence, you saw the restraining order for November 4th. So, after that, November 5th, the Shrine pops in. They send out a notice, essentially saying, hey, the Shrine's going to stay away from this. We're not going to get involved. Probably they decided to tag in, this is my opinion, not a fact, is they were going to do this at a Shrine Center, and they're like, we don't want our Shrine Center in the middle of none of your nonsense. We've seen this before in Arkansas, and nobody wins. So that's kind of a quick summary to get you up to date with what's going on. We've talked to many folks involved. Our team consists of some attorneys, law enforcement, members of many jurisdictions, and we've talked to a lot of folks about what's going on. So stay tuned for this. It's going to be interesting how this all plays out in Mississippi. And this channel's talked about nonsense that's happened before in Florida and Texas, and we'll make the same comment that we've made in the past. We hope that this all gets worked out and the craft in those jurisdictions, they end up coming out of the ashes and doing better. Texas on fire, they've done great. Florida has made a huge turn. But the Grand West in Mississippi, you guys can get involved. So for example, with all of these laws, these Grand Lodge proceeding laws that they tried to put in effect in Mississippi after the fact, most believe that those should have been voted on by the craft. And you can't basically charge somebody and then change the rules how you're going to treat them later. So that's one of the big bones of contingency. If you guys would like to see our full slew of documents, again, shoot us an email, Grand Lodge of Mississippi Documents. Just let us know who you are, what's your Grand Lodge, and we'd be happy to share it. None of it's secret. It's public information. It's not like we broke into a file cabinet somewhere, not like we hacked a server. We didn't do any of that. So we'd be happy to kind of share and get. This was a very abridged version. We're probably into the 50 to 100 page range of research to kind of condense this. So we'll stay tuned. We'll give you updates as we know it. And but above all else, send some extra prayers to the Grand Lodge of Mississippi. We want all of the Masons there to come out of this and have Masonry strong in Mississippi. Thanks for watching the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast.